Inside Racing, the very best in World Championship motorcycles. The very best in North American car racing. We'll show you what the trackside spectator never sees. We'll see the races, but also try to discover the secrets that are only revealed to those who are inside racing. Trans Am is the longest established racing series in North America, where American muscle cars take on the most sophisticated European GT machinery, with qualifying over the car's round Moss corner on their pace lap. The start flag just half a lap away. But we've had some last-minute drama here just before the start of the race. We're profiling Ludwig Heimrath, a former Trans Am champion. He's been in the garage for the last few minutes changing a fuel pump, and he's just now got on the track behind the rest of the field. Ludwig has not had the best of luck so far this season, but if effort and experience are what it takes for a return to victory lane, then he'll most certainly be there. And we're hoping to watch him do just that today on Inside Racing. Trans Am drivers are different. Sometimes young chargers on their way through to formula cars, sometimes older men who've done it all, but always enthusiasts, men like Ludwig Heimrath. Ludwig, you've tried a lot of forms of racing in your career. Why Trans Am racing with the Porsche?
Oh, I like sports car racing. Most of the racing I did in my life, I tried Formula cars, Indianapolis cars, and I tried sports racing cars, like the K&M cars called Group 7, and then I got back into sports cars again. I think the sports car category is more of my taste because it's more competitive, I think. You can run closer together, you can even rub fenders if you want to, if you get that close, and you cannot afford it in any other cars.
Obviously, it's very expensive. I mean, if you say $250,000 in a car, with all the traveling you do, all the races you go to, can you expect to recoup that kind of loss in a season?
No, you can't. You have to recoup it in advertising you do, using it as an advertising or promotion basis, and that's where you're going to recoup the money you spend. We're using it strictly as advertising because it's the only advertising we do. And I think we're recuperating at what we spend in our racing series. We just about doing even with what we would spend in advertising.
What do the bumps do on a circuit like this when you're hitting bumps? Do you have to compensate for them? Does it bother you when you're racing? Do you even notice it?
Oh, yes, you notice it quite a bit, particularly in my car. If the car is smooth, you can drive a lot smoother. If the car is bumpy or the track is bumpy, we have to sort of get the springing on the car together with the track. And we have to sacrifice for some parts of the racetracks because some parts are very bumpy and some of them are not as bumpy, and then you sort of sacrifice what is better for me, have the bumpy section or have the smooth section. Where do I pick up speed? And this is something what I usually have to talk over with my chief mechanic, and then we sort of make a decision what we're going to do. But this is sometimes very difficult to do.
If it wasn't difficult, no doubt Heimrath wouldn't want to try. He's done it all, but that won't stop him from trying again. U.S. driver John Paul, like Heimrath, drives a similar turbo Porsche, and they have dogged each other the whole season. But while Heimrath is a master at Mosport, Paul is a newcomer on a track many consider to be the most demanding in North America. For somebody who's never raced on this track before, what good piece of advice could you offer him if he was just showing up here for the first time?
I get a lot of practice. The track is very tricky. It's got a number of off-camber turns, particularly turn 2. And if you do go off the track or you go into a turn a little too heavy, hot and heavy, it's easy to slide out off on the marbles on the outside of the track and wind up in the guardrail. So this track requires, I think it's more a driver's track than a lot of racetracks we run on. So local knowledge and just lots of time on the track will help you. This particular race, Ludwig Heimrath is starting on the front row next to me. He's a local favorite. He knows the track real well. He and I have run real close together the whole season. And if he should go well anywhere, it's right here. This is his home track. So I think I tried real hard, and I didn't qualify. I'd qualify him by very much. I think the two of us are going to have a heck of a race going. And I'm just going to try to get away early, but I don't know if I can.
Where is the toughest place to pass on this track?
Oh, it's tough everywhere. There really aren't any good places to pass. Probably at the end of the back straight is about the best place, but even that is very hard because you can weave from side to side because the straight is really a series of quick, fast turns. So I think the man that's got on the pole has a distinct advantage. And I'm not sure I can get away, but it's going to be very hard for him to pass.
The Porsche is the ideal Trans Am car. It can be bought race-ready, over the counter. To compete against it means starting from scratch, something Mo Carter has done.
Oh, I took a close look at your Camaro earlier in the day, and about the only thing that looks like it's off a street Camaro are the taillight covers in the rear. What have you done to develop this car?
Well, it's a racing car, Paul. It's not a Camaro as such. It never has been on the street or anything of that kind. But the only really stock things in it are the frame, which have to be stock, and a number of the engine pieces and things of that kind. But everything else is handcrafted. It's a race car. It weighs only 2,250 pounds, or can weigh that little, which is about 1,200 pounds less than, say, our old race car, our old race Camaro. But it's designed to beat the Porsches. That's all it's here for, is to beat Porsches. We hate Porsches. And we designed it on that basis, and that's the reason we put it together. And
racing in a place like Mosport against the Porsches, what sort of strategy will you use to go into the race?
I don't know what I'll do now, because the engine we're putting in has a little less horsepower than the one we're taking out. So I would think probably I would sit on the tail of both Heimrath and Paul, who have the two fastest Porsches, and wait for them to make a mistake. And I would try to stay close to them. Our earlier strategy with the other engine was to go hell bent and try and get the pole and try and leave them. But that's had to change somewhat, and while we haven't made a final decision, I think we better wait till we get the engine in before we finalize anything.
Carter, like Heimrath and Paul, is a big-budget racer, but Trans Am also caters to the less affluent, men like Bill Adam.
Bill, your Corvette runs in Category 1, but there are Corvettes running in Category 2 as well. What's the difference between them?
Essentially, the Category 1 cars are more of a production-based type of a car. We have to stay virtually by the production car rules for building this vehicle. All the components that are in use are right as they come from the factory. They're obviously very, very heavy-duty items, but they are the same. Category 2 cars are completely different in that they can change the suspension components, the drivetrain, totally. They're much, much lighter cars. They usually have much more powerful engines and accordingly go much faster as well.
Since the Category 2 cars are faster, do you ever feel like a second-class citizen back in the field having your own race?
There's a little bit of it, I suppose, comes through, because it's always nice to have a first overall victory. That always feels good. But usually in the Category 1 racing, the fields are so competitive that we don't really have problems worrying about it. We just go out and have as good a race as we possibly can and worry about that.
The pace lap came to an end. John Paul drove alone at the front. Heimrath, who had spent a last frantic hour fixing his car, entered the race at the back during the pace lap and sat behind the whole field. But as the cars crossed the start line, Heimrath's white Porsche came around corner 9, going very slowly. He entered the pits. At the front, Paul led with Mo Carter, the Porsche hater, just behind. Frank Joyce's Corvette in third, the leading Category 1 car. At Moss Corner, where the track turns back towards the start, the order was unchanged. Behind Joyce was Bill Adam, his closest Category 1 challenger. Into the S's at the end of the back straight, John Paul still held the Camaro at bay, with Joyce and Adams still in third and fourth positions. Meanwhile, in the pits was an extremely angry Ludwig Heimrath.
What happened with the car?
I had a problem. I wanted to get back into the. They waited for me till I got the car finished, and they waited for me to get back into it, and there's a Mustang out there, a blue-white Mustang, and he took me off the track about 5 times, and it just wouldn't let me just wouldn't let me get into it, and then he ripped my oil line off because he pushed me right off the track, and that cost me the engine blow up. Nothing I can do about that. So many assholes out there,
Like a caged lion, the frustrated and furious Heimrath paced the pit area, but his day was over. In trouble early was Klaus Beitzik, a local enthusiast, a man who may never win a major race, but will always enjoy himself. At corner 2, the most difficult of the corners at Mosport, someone was off the track, obscured in a cloud of dust. While John Paul's Porsche still enjoyed a lead over Carter's Camaro. The dust cleared. The car off at corner 2 was revealed as that of Bob Zolkowski, whose trip from California had brought little success. Meanwhile, in Bill Adams' pit.
Dave, so far, Bill's second in his class and fourth overall. Is it going according to plan so far?
Yeah, he's running exactly as we figured. We're hoping that some of the cars that are in the front, preferably Frank Joyce, maybe will have some trouble or get into some mistakes. Bill is going to run second. He's planning on running second position behind Joyce just to keep enough pressure on him until about halfway through the race, and then he's going to make a move on him. What he's doing now is actually pacing the race. He's pacing the Category 1 cars.
But what was the story from the pit of Adams' rival, Frank Joyce?
You're in radio communication with Frank. Has he talked to you at all since the start of the race?
No, he said nothing yet, which we will assume means everything's okay so far.
You're running according to plan. Is this what he wants to do, is stay in front of Bill Adam?
Excuse me. Yeah, hopefully we'll stay ahead for the entire race. I really don't know what his plans were. Things seem to be good right now. So far, so good. We'll hope it lasts.
Good. Thanks, Mike.
But the interest of the crowd was focused on the bigger, faster cars of the Category 2 race. At corner 5, Moss Corner, John Paul still led. The corner is a tricky double bend that requires particular care, as I discovered earlier.
Sterling, this corner up here under the bridge is one of the fastest portions of the track, and it leads into one of the slowest areas, a corner, oddly enough, named Moss Corner.
Yeah, well, that's not my fault, but let me tell you how that happened. The point was, when I arrived here, as you say, it's a very interesting corner, because this, again, is another blind one. But when I arrived, I said to them, look, don't make a hairpin. It's a very uninteresting corner. Let's try and make it into 2 corners, which now you've got one corner here, and you've got to let the car go over to the left. Then you've got a short straight, although it's taken as 1 corner, and then you've got another right angle, which is a bit tighter. And then you start the straight, of course.
How much problem does it present coming up here when it's blind, when you're under braking and you have to turn into a slow corner?
Well, the one thing about it is slow. And when you get a slow corner like this, you get people being brave, and therefore they're doing an awful lot of action. You're going to see more action here normally than anywhere else, because people will oversteer. They'll put the brakes on a bit late maybe, and it goes wide. But it should be taken in one gentle curvature with a lot of horsepower. You put a lot of power in, and of course the car does go out wide, and there's this sort of lip on the edge and everything. And it's a pretty interesting corner, actually.
At the end of the back straight, his speed cut from 170 miles per hour, John Paul negotiated the S's in front of Carter's Camaro. At 54, Carter is scarcely typical, but in Trans Am, who is?
I think the guys that race Trans Am are more truly drivers, because the average car that runs in Trans Am is not basically a race car. And they have to rely on their driving ability to get it around very quickly. The Formula Atlantic cars or the Formula 1 cars or the Can-Am cars are race cars. And they drive pretty easily, frankly, just like our car drives a little easier than, say, the ordinary Camaro. But I think most of the guys that run Trans Am really are excellent drivers. And if you look at the first-class drivers in North America, basically most of them have gone through the Trans Am series.
Carter forced his Camaro in pursuit of John Paul, he approached corner 2, a corner universally feared, or at least respected, by all the drivers.
What makes this corner so difficult?
Well, it's difficult to explain, but when you come into it, you'll see what I mean. You can see the blind brown. Now, at the moment, you can see it fairly easily because you've got the banks. But when you're coming this direction, there's nothing. You're setting up into a skyline with no feature at all. That's difficult. you have to decide where you want your apex to be, and whichever place it is likely to be wrong. If it's wrong, you're in trouble. The important thing here is to try to get the car in the right place, and when you land, don't sort of turn, because if you do, it's light, and you're going to get the back end, and you're going to spin down here.
So this is the type of corner that takes enough nerve that separates a champion from just a guy in the back of the field?
Well, I like to think it's not nerve. I like to think it's experience that helps you, because nerve, you don't want too much nerve, but equally, this is probably the most difficult corner in North America, actually. Very difficult one.
Competition was still fierce as drivers employed their various strategies, some forcing, some waiting. For Bill Adam, still second in Category 1.
Bill seems to be closing the gap between himself and Frank Joyce. Is this all part of the plot?
Yes, Paul. 2 years ago when he won, he got as far as 12 seconds down and still came back and won. At this point, it's fairly early in the race, we're not too worried.
Some would say a driver of Bill Adams' ability has a talent to be in bigger, faster cars. He's a working man who drives part-time only.
Some of the drivers you run against are race drivers as a profession. But for 5 days a week, you work in the insurance business and you turn into a race driver on a weekend. So what kind of handicap does that put you under?
It's a handicap, definitely, but fortunately I seem to adapt fairly quickly to the car once I get back into it, and that helps me a great deal. The biggest single handicap, obviously, is when you're out of the car, or when you're out of any sport for that matter, you lose the touch and the very fine edge that you develop by the constant exposure to whatever you happen to be doing. So it does take me a little bit longer than it normally would to regain that fine edge, and it takes a little while to build up to maximum speed.
Suddenly, Joyce was in the pits, incredibly in this short race, to take on fuel.
Why did Frank come in that time?
Well, we've had some fuel feed problems throughout the weekend. It seems that when the tank is less than full, there's starvation problems. We're not sure exactly what the problem's been. Thought we had it worked out this morning, maybe not. Obviously not.
Think you'll last a race?
We hope so. It's hard to say. It's a funny problem. It's not been our best weekend, but the season hasn't been too good for us either, so we're getting used to this, but we're still trying.
John Paul's car continued to lead overall, lapping with that effortless reliability that in motor racing circles has become synonymous with Porsche Turbo. Racers are usually dedicated, serious men whose whole lives are devoted to winning races. What then motivates a man like Bill Adam?
We do it to have fun. That's our primary reason. We want to continue having fun, and if it gets to the stage that even if we are making money at racing but not having fun or not enjoying it, we'd quit. Simple as that.
Paul rounded the S's, now with a comfortable lead over Carter. Both cars were running well, something that couldn't be said of Paul Canary's Corvette, which passed seemingly under steam power.
Rob, Bill seems to be a little long overdue. You getting worried?
Well, obviously, Paul, when anything comes in over, even 3 or 4 seconds, one starts to get worried, and the PA announcer says he's perhaps off at corner 5, so we'll just have to wait and see.
Their driver missing, tension in the pits reaches its peak. Fear for his safety, rumors. But on the track, not at corner 5, but on the outside of corner 3, Bill Adam is out of the car, unharmed. While others pass, Bill removes his helmet as the new leader in Category 1 goes by, Gene Bothello in another of the ubiquitous Corvettes. 9 of the 16 Category 1 starters did so in Corvettes, a car made for Trans Am racing, if ever there was one. And Mo Carter, the Porsche hater, steadily giving ground to the leader. Nonetheless, his is the only car still circulating in Category 2 that isn't a Porsche.
Mo's currently in second place. How's the engine holding up that you replaced only a few minutes ago?
Well, he's been twisting it pretty high. He's been trying to catch the leader at the beginning, and he's kind of backed off a little now. So if we can finish second, we'll be happy. Definitely not putting out the horsepower that we wanted, but it is a smaller engine, so we can't expect miracles.
lengthening shadows, the race progressed. In some, hope still ran high. For others, the day was over.
Oh, Bill, there's not going to be any champagne or caviar when this day's over. What happened to you?
Was getting a fair bit of a brake problem right from the opening lap. On the grid, and I was just sitting out there, I tested the brake pedal and the thing went to the floor on me. Not the good thing to give you a lot of confidence starting a race, but I decided before I'd panic, I'd just see what happened on the pace laps. Once the motor was running, he developed a lot more braking pressure. So I was able to get the brakes back up on those pace laps, but something was obviously amiss because it was locking the right front wheel quite badly, and I suppose it got to the point where it just flat wore through the tire and it finally blew going into turn 3, so we hit the concrete barrier quite hard, and that's why we're out of the race.
How do you feel?
A little groggy right now, but I'm okay. I'll make it.
Courage, resilience, guts. Even for the part-time racers like Bill Adam, these are qualities necessary to overcome such disappointments and return to the racetrack once again to seek triumph. In the JPR Porsche, the race enters a new phase. His pursuers comfortably behind, the smell of victory ahead. John Paul must change his tactics. He knows that the race, the racetrack, and his car are all changing as the laps hurtle by.
Does the car get any more difficult to handle at the end of the race than it is at the beginning?
That depends on track conditions. Quite often the track gets oiled up, somebody blows an engine somewhere, and then of course it gets to be harder. Or if the tires go off or the car, or something breaks in the car. But generally when you have less fuel load, the car is easier to handle. It stops a little better and it turns into the corners a little better. But that's all things being equal, and they never are.
The last lap, nearly 100 miles behind. Only one lap of the 2.5-mile Mosport track still remaining. John Paul laps for the third time Barthello's Corvette, which still leads a Category 1 race. Carter, too, now has less than a lap to go. In the car, perhaps the driver wonders how different things might have been if the first-choice engine had been fitted. But in racing, second is second, and second only. Excuses don't count. Victory now within his grasp, John Paul rounded Moss Corner for the last time. Now he can feel the victory, taste the champagne, hear the accolades, revel in the adoration that are the just rewards of winners in this most demanding of all sports. Carter's pit crew, who had strived so hard all day, were justly jubilant. Today, his second place belonged equally to them. Victory lap, the appreciation of the crowd to John Paul. And to Gene Barthello, the winner of the Category 1 race.
Well, you've just seen the most exciting and awesome sports and GT cars seen in North America. I'm standing here this afternoon in Victory Lane, but I'm all alone. We'd expect to have Ludwig Heimrath in his number 7 Porsche with us, but he went out early in the race. Then we expected to see Bill Adam in his Corvette, but such was not the case. Racing is a chancy business, as you've seen today. Next week, we'll have a look at another exciting facet of motorsport on Inside Racing.